out your notebook. There's more.
Welcome to CN Live, Episode 7. I'm Joe Loria, Editor-in-Chief of Consortium News.
And I'm Elizabeth Voss.
On today's program, we'll be discussing the coming 9/11 trial announced today with John Kiriakou.
More than 19 years after September 11th, 2001, 5 men will stand in a military court in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, for the terrorist attacks, a U.S. military judge said today. The trial will begin on January 11th, 2021, and will be before a military jury. The government has until October 1st to turn over discovery materials to the defense. Defense attorneys want confessions thrown out for their clients that they say were elicited under torture.
Joining us to discuss this is someone who was personally involved in events related to this coming trial, former CIA agent John Kiriakou. John led the capture of Abu Zubaydah, Osama bin Laden's chief lieutenant, and he blew the whistle on the CIA torture program, which figures significantly in this case. Hey, John, welcome to CN Live.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, Joe. I've been looking forward to this.
Well, thank you, John. I've got really 4 burning questions that I'm not sure which order to begin asking you, but I'll start right away. Is there any way these guys could get a fair trial in a military court? If it's a U.S. military jury, how could that hardly be considered a jury of their peers?
Yeah, it's just not possible to get a fair trial. Literally not possible. And let me tell you something too. When we first started capturing Al-Qaeda prisoners in Pakistan in January of 2002, I was the chief of CIA counterterrorism operations there. And we hadn't caught any prisoners in Pakistan. They were all in Afghanistan. And those prisoners had been held in Afghanistan. Well, we started capturing them in Pakistan, and I simply didn't know what to do with them. So I called CIA headquarters, and I said, what do you want me to do with these guys? They're starting to accumulate. And I was told to put them on a military transport plane and send them to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. And I said, Cuba? Why would I send them to Cuba? And I was told that they had come up with a plan at headquarters that we put them all in Cuba. They'll sit there for 2 or 3 weeks until the appropriate federal district court can be identified where they would be tried. And then they would be sent from Guantanamo to either Washington, New York, or Boston to face trial in federal civilian court. And I thought, well, that's a great idea. If we have evidence that they've committed these terrible crimes of September 11th, they need to get in front of a jury as quickly as possible and be punished for their crimes. And we began sending everybody to Guantanamo. Everybody except, that is, the highest profile prisoners. In the beginning, it was Abu Zubaydah, who I captured on March 22nd, 2002. But then we began adding high profile prisoners. Ramzi bin Ashib, who allegedly masterminded the USS Cole bombing, the various attackers of the American embassies in Africa. Finally, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed in August of 2002. He was allegedly the mastermind of the 9/11 attacks. But instead of sending them to Guantanamo and then on to federal district court, they were sent to secret prisons. I can't say where, even though it's been reported widely in the press. The CIA has never declassified the information. But at those prisons, crimes against humanity took place. Their human rights, their civil rights, their civil rights were all violated. And not surprisingly, they confessed to everything from the 9/11 attacks to kidnapping the Lindbergh baby. And so what do you do with that information? You can't do anything because we have a constitution in this country. You know, Joe, it's no accident that these trials didn't take place in 2003 or 4 or 5 or any year between then and today. Twice before, military judges said that they were going to hold trials, especially of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Ramzi bin Ashib, and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's nephew, Omar al-Baluch. Those trials never took place. And the reason they never took place is because even the military judges recognized that because the CIA had tortured every one of these men, literally nothing that they said to implicate themselves could be used against them. So how in the world there's going to be a fair trial in January of 2021 when it was impossible every year before that is a mystery to me.
Well, next month, according to the New York Times, there'll be a hearing in this case on whether or not those confessions should be thrown out, a motion by the defense. Because, in fact, as you said, the confessions were yielded under torture. What you've just said is the military judges all realize that, but I wouldn't be surprised, would you, if the defense loses that motion and the confessions are not thrown out?
I wouldn't be surprised if the defense loses and they're not thrown out. But there's another issue here too, and that is, how are the defendants and their attorneys going to be able to interview or cross-examine or interrogate those human sources who identified the locations of these men that allowed the CIA to capture them? Or if it wasn't human intelligence that led to their locations, if it was signals intelligence or some other kind of clandestine method, those sources and methods are going to have to be revealed to the defense team so that the defendants can defend themselves, and the CIA would never, ever allow such a thing to happen.
Right. So that's not going to happen then. Now, when you said the judges already knew that there was torture involved, was that before you went public with the torture program or after?
No, no, it was after. The judges knew that there was torture involved in the military interrogation program before I went public, because of Abu Ghraib and because of a courageous Navy civilian whistleblower in 2005. But what the CIA was doing was still a mystery. There was one Army enlisted man at Guantanamo, Joe Hickman. Joe just happened to be the guard on duty when Abu Zubaydah arrived on a secret flight to Guantanamo and custody was turned over from the CIA to the Department of the Army. Joe spoke with Abu Zubaydah. Abu Zubaydah told Joe that he had been tortured, and then Joe kept his eyes open and noticed a couple of times when Americans wearing civilian clothes, not answering to the military, would take prisoners out of their cells and into a room that Joe was told was off limits to the military. And then those prisoners turned up dead the next morning and their deaths were ruled suicides. Joe blew the whistle. Not many people listened to him, but he went public. And that was before I ever did.
You led the arrest, basically, of Zubaydah. Why?
Yeah.
He is the chief lieutenant of Osama bin Laden himself.
Well, that's the
Why isn't he being put on trial here?
Yeah, that's the $64,000 question right there. Joe Hickman and I actually wrote a book about this called The Convenient Terrorist. In February of 2002, February 6th, 2002, I was called into the U.S. Embassy very early in the morning. I was met there by every senior intelligence officer in country, as well as the FBI's legal attaché. And I was told that Abu Zubaydah was somewhere in Pakistan and that we had to catch him. And I'm embarrassed to tell you that I had to sit there with a very serious look on my face, thinking to myself, Abu Zubaydah, that name kind of rings a bell to me, but I don't have any idea really who this guy is. And then I was told, Abu Zubaydah, he's the number 3 in Al-Qaeda. And I vaguely remembered reading something in Time magazine saying that he was the number 3 in Al-Qaeda. Okay, I'm happy to get with the program. Let's go look for the guy. We'll try and catch him. In fact, he was not the number 3 in Al-Qaeda. He was never a member of Al-Qaeda. He never pledged fealty to Al-Qaeda or to Osama bin Laden. He was a bad guy. He had established both of Al-Qaeda's training camps in southern Afghanistan as something like a contractor. He created and maintained Al-Qaeda's safe house in Peshawar, Pakistan, called the House of Martyrs. But he never actually joined Al-Qaeda, and he certainly was not the number 3. Besides that, and this is the real rub, and this is why Abu Zubaydah is not going on trial with the rest of these guys. There were 2 Abu Zubaydahs. There were 2 men, first cousins, who had the same name. Now, when you have one Abu Zubaydah file and the other Abu Zubaydah file, and you don't know that they're 2 different people, and you put them together, you have a file that looks like a terrorist Superman. He's in America. He's in Jordan. He's in Saudi Arabia. He's in Afghanistan. My God, this guy is everywhere all at the same time. And he's opening up safe houses, and he's opening up training camps, and he's the number 3 in Al-Qaeda, and he's robbing a bank in Bozeman, Montana. Well, it's frightening. But it was 2 guys. It wasn't the same guy. And so all these things that we accused Abu Zubaydah of doing, all these things that we tried to get him to admit to under torture, were false. They were done by his cousin. And as soon as his cousin smelled trouble, he ran from Montana to Florida to Jordan, disappeared in Jordan, and nobody's ever seen him again.
Wow. Elizabeth.
John, I was wondering why you think this has happened now, and why is it also that the mainstream press has really kind of ignored this story today, that it doesn't seem to be really on the radar of most people?
His own show.
Yeah.
You're right. Like my own show, which totally ignored this news today. For a couple of reasons. Number one, I think that Donald Trump really, really wants a scalp. I think Donald Trump secretly wishes that he had been a general or a war hero or something special, that he could pin medals on his chest. He'll never have those medals on his chest. It doesn't matter what he does now. It doesn't matter that he's become president. But to be the guy that finally convicts the mastermind of the 9/11 attacks after what, the 2 previous presidents couldn't do it, that's quite a trophy. I think he's doing it for his own very selfish purposes. But why is the mainstream media ignoring it? I think for the same reason my own show ignored it today. I think people generally don't care anymore. 18 years have passed, and there's a whole generation. Just a couple of months ago, we lost a soldier in Afghanistan. He was the first one that we've ever lost, who was born after the 9/11 attacks. And I think that people just really don't care anymore.
That is a really sad statement about our society after everything that 9/11 preceded. I think that's an extremely depressing outlook, but it seems to be accurate. I can't think of another reason why this would get so little press.
I agree with you.
Why there's perpetual war right now, and yet nobody cares about convicting the individuals who are involved. Of course, this should be in a civilian court. I attended and I reported for the Boston Globe the 1999 trial in the Southern District of New York, the United States versus Osama bin Laden. It was about the African embassy bombings. It was in a civilian court. Mary Jo White was there in the courtroom. I saw her there. She was, of course, the chief prosecutor down there, the U.S. the Southern District in New York. And it was a civilian trial, and I saw Al Qaeda guys on the stand, and there was a jury of civilians there, and they convicted these guys. And I thought that's the way it was going to go until the Bush administration came along and decided on this entire black sites and Guantanamo and military courts. And the whole thing's been a joke all along, hasn't it? All of these, they had various types of proceedings over the years as well, already in Guantanamo, haven't they, to try to see whether people should stay there or not.
In fact, they've already declassified 22,000 pages of documents from those hearings. Those hearings have been dragging on since 2003, and we're no closer to justice for anybody than we were in 2003. Joe, you go through some of these 22,000 pages of documents, and all you see is this nonsensical back and forth between the prosecution and the defense, where the defense is winging it. And they're winging it because they're not permitted access to any of the statements that their own clients have made. It's all deemed to be classified. And even though they have security clearances, those clearances aren't high enough to allow them access to the information that they need to defend their clients.
What could they possibly get in discovery by October 1st, which is only 2 months from now? They're supposed to, the government's supposed to turn over materials to the defense in discovery. What can they possibly hope to get?
Yeah, I saw that when the New York Times broke the story this afternoon. My guess is they can't hope to get much of anything, because whatever it is that the prosecution still has that they deem to be important enough to use in a trial, they're going to fight tooth and nail to withhold from the defense. My guess is that this is going to get bogged down in litigation, and that January 2021 date is just going to be pushed farther and farther back.
And there'll be less and less interest in the event that spawned mass surveillance, illegal mass surveillance, wars in several countries that continue to this moment.
Yes.
This is the genesis of it. If they actually tried these men in a fair way, which you established they most likely will not be, that could put some kind of a bow on this thing. And that's normally what we do in the American system, is to find someone who's guilty and try them fairly and then punish them. But instead,
right.
we've had wars and surveillance, and now nobody cares about the damn trial.
Yeah, that's right. We really could achieve closure. We achieved closure with Richard Reed, the shoe bomber, with Omar Abdurrahman, the blind sheikh. We've achieved closure over and over and over. We've tried terrorists in civilian courts over and over and over again, all across the country. all through our history. So what made these men so special, so terrible, so bad, so dangerous that they had to be kept in Cuba? Well, the only thing that did was the arrogance and the ego of Dick Cheney and the weakness of leadership of George Tenet. That's why we're still in this predicament as far as I'm concerned.
No, I'm going to let you go because you have to get a plane, John. But you were saying before we came on the air that Sheikh Khaled Mohammed, who is named as one of the defendants in this trial, was, you believe, the mastermind.
I do. I do believe he was the mastermind. We didn't know his name. We didn't know that his name was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. We knew only that there was a man known to his compatriots as Mukhtar, Mukhtar, who had been the mastermind of the Bojinka operation, which was a plan in 1996 to hijack more than a dozen 747s from Manila and then fly them into buildings along the U.S. West Coast. That was foiled. But we knew that there was this bad man out there. We didn't know his name. Abu Zubaydah finally gave us his name. Actually, let me clarify that. Abu Zubaydah gave the name Khalid Sheikh Mohammed to Ali Soufan over the course of a conversation over tea and dates, not to Mitchell and Jessen as a result of the CIA's torture program. That was the actionable intelligence that Abu Zubaydah gave us, and it did not come from torture.
Which is valuable evidence, obviously.
Indeed.
So, John, Elizabeth, if you have a final question, we'll let John go.
No, thank you, John, for joining us. I don't want to hold you up from your flight, but incredible insight. I'm glad at least a couple of people are asking questions about this and covering it today.
We're going to keep an eye on this story. That's for damn sure.
I'm so glad that you have.
Okay. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.